All right, so we are back with another Pickled Dragon Unscripted, and this time we have three very good friends of mine from different walks of life, but what they all have in common is that they are all vendors who have traveled about our great nation, selling their gaming wares at conventions, probably somewhere near you. So without further ado, I'm Matt, and Ashley's not with us tonight, but let me go ahead and just hand you off so they can each introduce themselves. Mari, why don't you kick it off and then pass it off to the next person?
I'm Mariana. Friends call me Mari. I own a company called D20 Stitchery. I make a lot of handmade gaming themed items, so dice bags that have pockets inside, embroidered messenger bags, things like that. And I go and sell a lot of local conventions across the state of Illinois. I have been branching out a little bit more and going to like Wisconsin and Michigan and slowly expanding a bit. But this is a secondary business of mine. I do have a regular full-time job on top of this.
Right on. Passing off to John, maybe?
Sure. I'm John Popson. I own Effin' Cool Miniatures up in Ohio. I'm not as convention savvy as either one of these people, but we make miniatures. I mostly sell through our website. Convention sales are kind of tough for miniatures because so many people are in the game. So it's not super cost effective for us to go to a lot of conventions. We hit Gary Con. We've done Origins, we've done a couple other things, but not nearly what we probably could do. It's, I have a business partner, but it's mostly a 1/2-man operation. Also have a full-time gig. I don't know who doesn't have a full-time gig also, but gaming's great. The best way to make $1 million in gaming is to spend $2 million. But yeah, I think that's about it. Kfir, let's hear from you.
I'm Kfir. I make fantasy maps under the name Geek Art, so a lot of people call me Cave. And I've been doing it, the actual maps themselves I've been doing for about almost 10 years now. But conventions since 2015, when I decided to take my art and go to conventions with it. It's a bit tangential to gaming because some of my maps are gaming related in the sense they're fantasy maps, so maybe they're maps of worlds that you might be gaming in, but most of my stuff isn't directly intended for use in gaming, but people do. People might get one of my map prints and use it as their reference when they're during their sessions, or they might get my digital assets and make some maps out of it. You can find my stuff at cavegeekart.com. Yeah, that's me.
Right on. And John, what's your website called?
EffinCoolMinis.com.
And Mari, you're on Etsy, right?
No, I actually now have my own website, d20stitchery.com.
Yeah, okay, cool. And we'll revisit all that a bit later. But so I know that there are, I almost forgot. So one of the things I used to do, and when I was talking to a few people, about the show coming back, they asked me if we were still going to do the show and tells that I used to do. So I always had like something new to share that it may not be gaming related, but it might be, but it's something cool. So I got something in the mail the other day from a friend for Christmas, and it kind of came in late, but I had to share it because it's so awesome. And I don't know, it looks blinding. It's blinded. Let me back it up.
It's crazy. It looks completely white, whatever it is.
It's whited out completely.
It's like the opposite of the blackest black.
No kidding, right?
It's the whitest white, and it's because it is the dude sitting there with a joint and White Russia. It's 3D printed, so it's probably why it's all white. That's sad. I might have to. I guess the porch light is on, and that light is coming straight at me right now. So oh well.
Fancy home studios, right?
Yes, exactly. And down here in Louisiana now, so that's everyone's complaining about the cold temperature up north, and like Wednesday it was 70 something here. So
Shut it down.
So John, how did you get into the miniature business?
Man, I've been a miniature nut my whole life. I started playing D&D in '79. So, I mean, it's been a long fascination with it. Really, I had a game store. That's kind of how it morphed into having a business. I had a game store, and I had kind of put most of the miniature related stuff away. I didn't go through the whole like Warhammer and all that. By the time Warhammer was big, I was kind of not into miniatures so much. And the kids that were coming to the game store got me to play Warhammer with them. And then I dug out my old miniatures, and then I started looking, just kind of researching into how to do it. And, I built a bunch of equipment because I couldn't afford to buy the equipment to actually do it. So, I built a spin caster, which is the main piece of equipment. You dump hot metal into it, and as it's spinning, centrifugal force fills the cavities of the molds. Well, I built mine out of a washing machine. The molds I used to make, there's the machine that we use for that is called a vulcanizer. It's a 1,000-pound piece of equipment that squishes the mold together around your parts to make cavities. And it hardens the rubber and turns it into like car tire rubber. Well, I just had the frame, the box that goes inside that machine. So I just closed mine with C-clamps and stuck it in the oven and would bake them that way for, I could make one mold every 5 or 6 hours. I'd have to wait for it to cool down because you couldn't there'd be so much pressure inside of the can that you couldn't open the C-clamps. But like from the minute I spun my first miniature, like 8 years ago, from that point, I've been hooked. I was just telling my partner today, we purchased hold on a second. I didn't just skip away, did I?
No, you're there.
Okay. I bumped my tab and it took the screen away, but we purchased a $70,000 plastic injection machine.
Ooh.
And so like, it's the same machine that Reaper's using now for Bones USA. And so when we also just moved our entire factory a mile down the road. So like, it's just been a lot of work for the last 3 months. But when I was setting up a mold this morning for the plastic injection machine, and my partner was casting metal miniatures, and he said, man, he goes, just go do what you have to do. I was supposed to leave to do something like for an hour. I said, I can't get this mold to fill out right. I need to keep getting it, And I said, that's what's got me the whole time, is that the completion, the sense of completion when you get it to run perfectly right and all the cavities fill and you pull those first minis off, it still tickles me. I got like goosebumps talking about it because when it's right, you go, damn, that was cool.
Yeah,
it's such a nerdy thing. It really is, but I don't care.
that's awesome. So Mari, same question. I know that you've been like somebody, and I've known Mari for a long time, but I know that you're somebody that has built quite a bit of stuff over the years, and I don't know, is that how you got into it, or?
It's weird because I really didn't get into gaming until later in life, mostly because I didn't really know about gaming. I kind of grew up under a rock, in a manner of speaking, but I was always into fantasy, science fiction, loved to just plow through books and watch movies all the time. And then it wasn't until I hit college that friends of mine introduced me to D&D, and I loved it because it was the books, but I got to be a part of the story. So I really got into it then, and when I got back home, I really didn't have a group, and I didn't know how to go about finding one until a coworker said, hey, my husband drives to Springfield every Sunday for a game. Do you want to come? I'm like, 3 hours in the car every Sunday? I get to roll dice. Yeah, I'm in. So I kind of got more and more into it, but I also on the side had this passion for crafts and sewing. While I was in college, I was a big cosplayer. I was in the medieval guild. I made costumes. And when I got home and I started to lean more towards gaming, I still wanted to do those hobbies and those things I enjoyed. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't really mesh them together. And then it was like a hand upside the head. It's like, actually, yes, you can. So I started finding more and more examples of people who took their passion for one thing and merged it with another. So like now I can do cross stitch designs that are everything from the most profane language you could ever find with beautiful little flowers around it, all the way up to a fully detailed, like 3-foot by 2-foot, full coverage cross stitch from Lord of the Rings that will take you 5 years to complete. You know, there's everything out there, and it's so much fun to be able to merge those passions.
Right on. Fear, cave.
Let's see. How did I get into making maps, I guess?
Well,
so
how did you, I have a special question for you. How did you discover your, because you haven't really explained your particular unique way of making maps. Which...
Okay, so I've been playing D&D since I was in 3rd grade, not 1979. I was born in 1979. So
oh.
Whippersnapper.
So I've always played D&D, loved fantasy and stuff like that. I did enjoy making maps as a kid, but I never really, I made a few as a dungeon master, you know, things like that. Never got really into it. But then my background is in actually in primitive skills and primitive survival skills. And I used to brain tan buckskin for a living and teach other primitive skills. Fire making, all kinds of things like that, making bone tools. And to make a really long story a little less long, I this is the you know, me telling me the background of my character, and want to hear about my character. Yeah. So I was already making, just for fun, I was trying to sell them, but I was making them for fun, bone replicas of weapons from Lord of the Rings, because I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. So I was literally taking deer, camel, moose, giraffe, whatever, bones, and making knives and swords out of them that were basically replicas of the ones from Lord of the Rings, sort of giving them a more primitive twist, right? Because they're usually steel and all that. So I'm like, let's see what they look like with a more primitive twist to them. And then when the Hobbit movie was coming out, I had the idea in my head of what would a primitive map of Middle Earth look like. So I thought, well, I'm going to put it on a hide, on a brain tan deer hide, which I already had, and I'm going to use natural pigments and a stick to paint it on. But I didn't know how I was going to transfer the actual map to the hide. I didn't want to just freehand it because I was scared to do that. And it's a map. If I screw it up, it's no longer an accurate map. So, right. So I wanted to find a way to transfer it. And I tried all kinds of things. I tried carbon paper, and that didn't work because buckskin is too soft and it just doesn't take the transfer. You can't use a light table because light doesn't go through it. It's leather. So to those who don't know, anyone watching this who doesn't know, brain tan buckskin is probably the original type of leather. It's been around for tens of thousands of years, and it's still being made the same way, except instead of a stone scraper or a bone scraper, we might use a metal one, but the actual technique is the same as it always has been. Not much has changed, and machines can't really make it. So it's one of the best quality leathers on earth. It's very soft, very supple, and that's important for what I do. So I ended up getting the idea to take my wood burner that I had at that point just done. I just got into wood burning like a year before, right? This is winter 2012, I think. And I thought, if I take my wood burner and I print out the map at the size that I want, I put that on the hide, just a paper print, and then I take my wood burner and I burn dots through the paper to actually burn little dots into the skin. Then when I remove the paper, I'll have sort of this big connect the dots sort of game, right? Of mountains and rivers and everything. So I did that, and it worked. I thought I was cheating, but I actually learned that there's I think it's a Renaissance or medieval or Renaissance method called pouncing, where they actually used to take their parchment and poke holes through it and then rub charcoal through on the actual original to transfer to transfer the charcoal outline onto a wall or another canvas. So I'm like, oh, sweet. I just reinvented something. All I had to do was research it. I wouldn't have had to reinvent it. But when I connected all those lines on that first Middle Earth map, when I started connecting all those lines, and I was doing it with the wood burner because I thought, I have all these burned dots in the skin. I can't just paint over them because you'll still see those dots. It'll look ugly. So I'll just connect all the lines with the burner. And when I did that, I noticed that the skin was shrinking. Anywhere you burn skin, it shrivels, especially when it's really soft, pliable skin, leather like buckskin. And by shrinking, it actually created a three-dimensional surface. So that was the first indication I had that something was going on I didn't expect. And so since then, it's been 10 years. I've I don't know that I've perfected it, but I've improved that process where I actually use that to my advantage to create an even more three-dimensional process, three-dimensional map.
And those maps are stunning. And we'll be sharing some of that. We'll be sharing everybody's work here. But your maps, I know I have a couple of the prints, which we're getting ready to get framed. But they are beautiful.
Thank you.
And you do more than just burning too, because after the burning process is done,
I paint them.
Yeah.
So then I paint using natural pigments and a piece of bone. The burning, because it involves electricity. That's the only real modern technique that I use. Everything else could have been done 10,000 years ago the same way.
Right. That's awesome. So
as far as conventions go, I started in 2015. I hurt my back. I had a retail job after I stopped doing primitive skills for a living. I had a retail job for a while, then I hurt my back. Couldn't do that, and one thing led to another. And a friend said, "Why don't you try taking your stuff to conventions?" I didn't really have much stuff, but he said, "Why don't you try to do that?" And I went, and one convention to the next, and here I am.
So, Mari, what was your first convention experience like? And what drove you to go ahead and take the leap?
Temporary insanity, mostly. My first convention was one here in town. That was one of the big factors. And it's not like one of the huge conventions you have like Gen Con or anything like that. It's called Winter War. And it has an attendance maybe 400 to 500 people. And it's a lot of the more, I don't like to say, but like old school gamers, like the hardcore like war gamers who have very intricate setups and they're very into the games and the room goes absolutely quiet, these hardcore gamers. And I got a little table in the back. I'm like, I'm just going to sneak in, sit there, see what it's all about, and then I'm going to sneak out. It'll be fine. It was absolutely terrifying. I'd never done anything like that before. And it was absolutely amazing. I took a complete shot in the dark thinking that maybe my little dice bags that I started with would be popular. And I did well at the convention. And more than anything, like almost everybody at the convention came by to say hi. Didn't matter if they were going to start a game in 5 minutes. They made a point to walk to all the vendors, talk to them, say hi, see how everyone's doing. And just that feeling that everyone wanted to come by and just chat was just amazing. They don't even know me and they wanted to come and just talk about gaming and common interests.
So, John, what was your first con? And did you have to travel far for that?
First con vending was actually Gary Con. I'm not sure which one. Be 6 years ago. I don't remember which one that was, but it was the last one at the lodge before they moved to the Grand. So I was there, but I wasn't there. Like I wasn't on any paperwork there. I went there and we had a small little table that they let us give away sample miniatures at. And the reason I went there was to actually meet with Jim Ward to sign a contract with him to do Metamorphosis Alpha miniatures.
Oh,
So that was like our first Kickstarter. That was kind of, you know, it was all just so new. It was weird. You know, I had met a bunch of people in the industry through the years, you know, going to like Gen Cons in 90, 91, 92. And I met all those people, but they were all so larger than life, you know. But by the time that Gary Con came around, like meeting Jim Ward was a huge thing for me because I was a huge fan of Gamma World and, you know, a huge fan of his writing. But to know that he's just a dude who lives with his wife and, you know, north of Lake Geneva, it's just weird, you know, being invited to Ernie Gygax's cottage at the time. And, you know, like growing up, I just had this larger than life thing, you know, that just isn't really what it is. And I think once the humanity of all these people really hit me, I stopped being intimidated about it. Because that first Gary Con, I was completely intimidated by all these people. I'm just like, Jesus, they're going to figure out I'm a fake. They're going to know. How are they going to know? You're just faking. I've been doing this for a while now, and I still have a horrific case of imposter syndrome. I keep waiting for somebody to figure out that I'm a fake. So
yeah, it's almost, I remember meeting, who was it I met? I want to say it was Larry Elmore, but I don't think it was. It was one of the other old school guys. And I was just like, I was certain that he's going to think I'm just like some drooling, you know, fan who,
fanboy.
and he was just super nice, you know,
just without a fail, all fairly approachable.
Yeah,
you know?
They're all very, very kind. And I've been to a number of cons, and that basic experience with the old timers is held true pretty consistently. But yeah, it's a pretty amazing experience when you get to meet some of those guys. So your first con, were you just giving away samples?
Yeah, we were just giving away some minis because just nobody knew who we were.
Mm-hmm.
We had a website up, and I mean, still nobody knows who we are. Like, we're still fairly limited known, but at that point, I think I had been making miniatures, like manufacturing miniatures, for maybe a year and a half. At that point, I was still using the washing machine.
Right on.
I used the washing machine all the way through, about halfway through casting the Metamorphosis Alpha Kickstarter. I actually bought a used spin caster and had it shipped from the East Coast over here. I still that's the number one that we use all the time. We have 3 of them, but one of them just sees the most use.
Most reliable there.
Well, you know, one of the problems is that metal prices have fluctuated so horrible since COVID. I'm paying almost twice as much for metal as I was. So from $13 a pound to, I bought 400 pounds this week at, I think it was 22 or 23 bucks a pound before shipping. Yeah, so it's drastic increase. The plastic, on the other hand, has gone up, but not anywhere near. And I can get by volume 8 miniatures with the plastic injection to every 1 metal per pound. You know what I mean? So it's hard to argue. You know, you're looking at metal miniatures are now costing me, you know, things that were costing me, 97 cents before packaging are now $1.60 before packaging.
Wow.
So it's pretty rough. It's going to make it really hard if tin prices don't normalize and start coming back down. Metal miniatures are going to be really hard to get. Reaper just announced their catalog update for their metal, it has moved from, their metal minis are moving from like the $9 range to the $11 and $12 range.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, per figure. Now the upside is that their Bones USA line is hitting $4. I think 4 is for a medium sized figure, and that's kind of, we're trying to keep right around in that same pricing with them, even though our metal still, you know, we haven't changed our prices at all. I don't move the volume that they do, so.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whatever I
Right.
sell, and
I
it's
think
all.
they offer free shipping worldwide too, as long as you spend.
I think that, yeah, but I think that all just got canceled.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think that the most recent update. I've got a buddy who still has a store, and he got his buyer sheets from them, and just tons of things have changed. The pricing's all changed, and it has to. You know, that sucks, but unless I hate to get on a tirade about this, but if you want to buy PVC miniatures and average, 30 cents a piece or whatever the number may be, they have to come from China. There's just no way you can manufacture in the States for that price point. Even with all things being equal, labor just is so much cheaper overseas. Reaper, their Bones line has been produced in China. I think a lot of people have been under the misconception that Bones has been produced in the United States. But if you look at all those 3 boxes behind you, Matt, if you look at it, they all say manufactured in China, because you cannot sell a dragon that size for $12 if it was made in the US. It's just not possible. So
I only know of one company that's doing their own injection molding. And they don't make miniatures, they make dungeon tiles. That's Architects of Destruction. They do everything in the States here. But they took their first Kickstarter money and they bought their own machine and their own die cutting machine and their own, and basically all the investment went towards that. So they had complete control over their product.
Yeah.
It's
2 people with plastic injection in the United States, son.
Boom. There
Yeah.
you go. Kfir, I am interested. John brings up a good point, and that is COVID destroying, or I shouldn't say destroying, but really hiking the prices up, everything. Well, how does it affect you?
It affects me directly. First of all, cost of paper has gone up. So I sell my originals. Let's say my originals are all done by hand on deerskin. So the cost of that hasn't really gone up much, right? That's I deal with it's a small business. It's a tanner in Pennsylvania that makes them for me. And honestly, he could charge me whatever he wanted, it'd still be worth it, right? But when I sell prints of my maps, because I can't make a living off just selling originals. So when I sell prints of my maps, that's on paper and different types of paper, so that has definitely gone up. I actually kept my prices the same as they have been since before the pandemic, but I will be raising them now, coming up in February, because I keep getting emails from my paper vendor saying this and that is going up in price 10-20% or whatever it is. So that's the first place where that hit me. But then when it comes to conventions, then cost of hotels, cost of travel, cost of everything has gone up. That was always going up, really. I mean, that was just a constant, just a fact of life, that those things are always going up every year. But COVID certainly didn't help with that. So
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I asked them about their first con. I'm curious, your first con that you had to travel long distance for. What did you learn from that?
Define a long distance. I guess if you can't go back home.
Yeah, if you can't sleep at home, you got to sleep.
Okay, so actually my first convention was in Philadelphia. It was a Wizard World Philly, and I will say the caveat that I have done very few gaming conventions. Most of the conventions I have done by far are just what people would call Comic Cons. Just your regular sort of pop culture flea market is what it is, right? And so my first convention was Wizard World Philly. I didn't know squat about running conventions, about having my own booth. I only had originals. I spent a bunch of money on buying, grid wall for a display and things like that. I ended up breaking even, which was great. But it was in Philly and I lived in Jersey, but I lived about an hour away, so I wasn't going to travel back and forth. So I guess I had to pack everything with me. So you'll learn a lot if you forgot something at home, you can't go pick it up, right? You can't say, oh, I'll bring it tomorrow. So you really have to have your game on and make sure you don't forget stuff, which I still do. There's lists for everything, right? I've got lists for everything. I've got bags. I actually just went through this gallon Ziploc bag today that I was cleaning up and organizing things, and I found my bag of convention stuff because I just came back in December. I went to Emerald City in Seattle, Emerald City Comic Con, and because I was flying, that's very different from driving. When I'm driving, I can just chuck everything into the car and extra stuff, right? And things that, who cares? I might not need it, but I don't care. It's in the car, right? And I'll have my car with me. When I'm flying, I got everything has to come in. My suitcases came in at like 49 pounds and 15 like just under the 50-pound mark, not having to pay any extra for it. So, and I'm standing there. I actually have to stand there at the check-in with the luggage and be like, oh, that one's 50 and a half. So I got to open it and move stuff over and reweigh things. But so yeah, I found this bag today and I'm going through it and stuff in it. And that bag, even though there's stuff in it that I might want to use in day to day, I am not taking it out. Right. It's stuff like USB cords and pens that work and all kinds of things, just the little things like that. And that bag is staying in the closet until I have to go to another convention, because if I take it out and I start using those things now, I will forget that I need them next time. So I actually, when my first convention, not post COVID, but during COVID, I guess, was June 2021. I did a North Texas RPG Con, and I specifically did that one because it's a very small convention, and I thought, you know what, I haven't done a convention at that point in about a year and a half. Like I need to practice because I I will forget stuff, and I did, right? But I forgot some important things. But I will. It was a small convention, so it's not a big loss. I was just I'll go, I'll have fun, and and it'll remind me what it's like. There's a big difference between doing a convention with 500 people in it and a convention with 50,000 people. So learn your lessons on the 500 people.
Okay, yeah.
Not as big of a loss.
I have a funny Kfir story real quick though.
Oh.
Well, in the move from our previous location to this location, we came across all the con totes. The last physical convention we did was the last physical Gary Con.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
Yeah, we were there.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. You were there. So what I have I'm going through the totes and going, well, we don't need this anymore.
Is it a bottle of scotch?
It is, in fact, a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue signed by Larry Elmore. Do you remember that? So we were drinking the Blood Oath bourbon we had in our booth. And you guys had Johnny Walker Blue, and Elmore didn't drink it with you. You said you just had him sign the bottle for some reason.
It was an empty bottle.
It was
right?
an empty bottle.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't drink it, and I'm like, it took me a second. I'm like, here, Cave gave me that bottle, and I just thought it was cool because it had Elmore's signature on it. Unfortunately, I gave it to one of my buddies who was helping us move. I was like, well, here's Elmore's signature on a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue.
No one has that.
That's one of a kind.
Think of another person that does.
It's like a perfect Step Brothers moment where he holds a katana, you're not going to get his signature, right?
I did a Walker Stalker convention. I don't even remember the year. I think it was 2016 or 2017. It was a Walking Dead convention. And I had some Walking Dead pieces, so I thought, let me try. And there were these couple of guys that come over to my booth and they're looking at specifically my Walking Dead pieces that I had. I had one portrait of Daryl, what's his name? The actor, I forget.
He's Daryl.
Yeah, he's just Daryl. I do know
Yeah,
his name, but I can't
right.
think of it either right now.
The greasy looking guy.
Yeah.
And then I had this huge piece that I built. It was a tribute to Herschel's barn episode, where they find Sophia in the barn with all the zombies and all that. And it was an enormous piece. I built a barn door that was like 4 feet by 4 feet, and I nailed a hide to it, and the hide had a skull made of zombies from the show on it. Anyway, so I've been collecting autographs from Walking Dead actors on that piece at conventions, but I didn't have that actor's autograph yet. So these guys are looking around and they're talking to me about those pieces, and turns out these guys are autograph dealers, right? That's what they do. They make a full-time living off of getting celebrity autographs on stuff and then selling it. Sports, pop culture, whatever. So
You have their number for that bottle?
So I don't think they'd care. I don't think they'd care about that. So they were like, oh, we have a private signing with Norman Reedus. Right? That's his name. They're like, we have a private signing with him tonight at the end, after 5 o'clock when the convention hall closes. Why don't you just bring your 2 pieces over, and we'll put those right up front. So we'll sign those first, and it'll even cost you half the price that he charges at his table to regular convention attendees, which was at the time was like $80 a pop. Since then, I think he charges way over $100, 150, 200. But anyway, so I was like, okay, I'll do that. So at the end of the day, I take my pieces over. They had, your regular 8-foot long convention table. There were maybe 5 of those covered with stuff, right? Pictures of him, posters, Funko Pops, all kinds of toys, whatever you can imagine was there. There were maybe 30 crossbows, cheap crossbows, but they're all stacked up. And these guys were like, yeah, this is all sold. It's all already pre-sold, right? And they're just having him sign it. And they had baseballs. They're like egg cartons of baseballs. And I'm like, why baseballs? And they were going, well, because no one's gonna have a baseball with Norman Reedus' autograph on it. So,
maybe the bottle is something they want.
So that's what got me. That's what gave me the idea. I'm gonna get Larry to sign this bottle. But I have a tradition with Larry now that every convention that I do with Larry, I have him do all these weird things, and I usually just give them away, like these Larry Elmore originals that he's embarrassed to do them. It actually embarrasses him. It was a Dragon Con convention stories. So actually at my first Dragon Con is an enormous convention in Atlanta. And it's probably the nerdiest, big convention that's not a gaming convention, right? So it's not gaming focused, but it is all kind of fantasy, sci-fi, etc., pop culture. It's not your usual Comic-Con. It's a lot of parties, and it's like Burning Man for indoor nerds is what Dragon Con is. And I was at my first Dragon Con, and I realized Larry Elmore had a booth there. This is in 2016. So I go over to his booth, and I had met Larry once at Gen Con 2000 when D&D 3rd edition was coming out, and I was just visiting. And a friend of mine who was actually, I'm from Israel originally, and a friend of mine I was staying with in Chicago, he was like, hey, he was the only importer of RPGs to Israel. You would find this funny. He would come over to the States. His parents had a printing business, and they actually printed stuff of FASA and Kenzer and some of the gaming industry companies, because they're a lot of them were based in Chicago. So he had connections. He would come over to the States with these giant suitcases, back when they allowed you to have giant suitcases, and he would fill them with books, right? They would weigh 500 pounds. I'm not joking, because imagine this enormous, like 4-foot by 3-foot suitcase filled solid with books, with gaming books. And so he would fill them, and this is in the late 90s, right? And he would fill them with books, like 2 or 3 of those, fly them back to Israel at no extra cost, because back then airlines didn't charge you for that. And he would just sell them to stores, to bookstores and gaming stores. It was it was insane, and we ran. I helped him run the only gaming convention in Israel at the time. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, I'm visiting, and he says, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Gen Con. You want to go?" And I'm like, "What? Gen Con?" I had heard of Gen Con, right? But I'd never even dreamed I would go. So of course I want to go. And the story is longer, but he takes me to Gen Con, and then I see Larry Elmore, and Larry Elmore is sitting. I'm walking around like awestruck, right? And overwhelmed. It was my first big convention ever. And I see Larry Elmore sitting in this tiny, maybe 6-foot table, maybe, right? At the end of a row, selling, I think he might have had some prints, and he had SnarfQuest books. That's it, you know? And I was just like, oh my God, it's Larry Elmore. And 20 years later, or 16 years later, I'm at Dragon Con, and Larry's there, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go meet the man again. You know, he definitely won't remember who I am. And so I go and I went like 2 or 3 times, and he was never at his booth. And I told his helper there, you know, so I can't walk away from my booth too long. It's my first, you know, I'm alone at my booth upstairs. If Larry can come over at some point, and I didn't even dream it could happen. And then I go back to my booth, and 20 minutes later, I look up and I see Larry Elmore standing at at my booth, looking at my stuff. Yeah, I was just blown away. And since then, Larry's become a great friend of mine. And so at conventions, there was a Dragon Con where I went down to visit him. I usually bring some sort of a beverage, an adult beverage. And my mission is to get Larry drunk. And so Betty hates me for that. And so I will give him some good bourbon or good scotch. I don't really try to get him drunk. And one time I go down to his booth to see what he's up to, and I see a piece of paper in front of him with this dragon, a tiny dragon drawn on it that looks like a chicken. It's the stick figure of a dragon, right? If you know, was it Trogdor? The dragon,
The Burninator.
Mhm.
the Burninator. Yeah, it looked even worse than that. So I'm looking at it like, Larry, what is that? And he is so embarrassed in a way only Larry can be. And he says, well, there was this woman here, and she was asking me questions about drawing, and I thought I was being funny. And he drew purposefully a really crappy, basically cartoon of a dragon, not even a cartoon, right? A 3-year-old would draw a better one. And he was like pretending it's a big deal. And he didn't realize she was filming.
Oh.
She was filming for Facebook Live. And now Larry is embarrassed because he thinks now everyone on Facebook thinks that he's a crappy artist because he drew this shitty dragon. So I'm like, Larry, this is amazing. What do you want for it? And he goes, no, you can have it. I'm like, Larry, what? No, seriously, I'll pay you. What do you want for it? So he didn't want to. So he gave it to me for free. And since then, I come up to Larry, and don't anyone else watching this try to do this, all right? Because he will kill me. And I bring him like regular, printer paper, the crappiest there is, and a Sharpie, and I'm like, Larry, you got 20 seconds. Draw me a dragon or a goblin or whatever. And he does, and he always has trouble with the first one because he tries to be fancy about it. And I'm like, no, Larry, that's too fancy. Try again. He goes and finally he gets a crappy one in 20 seconds that he actually manages to finish. And then I gave it away as gifts to my friends because, like, hey, do you want a Larry Elmore original? And they're like, really? Here you go. It took him 20 seconds. I actually have one here. I can show you if you want.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let me see if I can find it. It's a big one. I was
Great. Mari, do you have a favorite con story? I know that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as a vendor. I know you visited, you've been to Gary Con.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was actually my first time going to a gaming convention where I wasn't a vendor. So it was a whole different experience for me. All of my experience at conventions as an attendee had been like anime, sci-fi conventions before that. So it was incredible. I had just complete like shock going on the whole time. I'd be walking down a hallway and I'm like, it's Larry Elmore. And then I walk down the other way. I'm like, oh my God, it's one of the Gygaxes. And just, it was like a whole different experience seeing it from the other side of the table.
I I can remember meeting Ernie for the first time, and he wanted me to go to his house to show me all his treasures. And I don't know if you've had that experience. He calls them his treasures, and
Oh.
and it was just like, it kind of goes back to the, you know, just how kind these people are. It's just, you know, invite a stranger to your house so you can show off your gaming stuff, you know.
Mm.
But I have a Larry Elmore story, but I'm going to let Kfir show off the Larry Elmore original.
This one is actually fancier than normal. Right?
Whoa!
So this this is actually like he took a whole minute to do, and it was way fancier than I wanted. I'll send you I still have pictures of that original somewhere on my phone, and I'll email those to you. You could like do a quick quick thing on the screen.
One of my favorite things. I actually, you know what? I'm gonna shelf that for just a second because I do want to show something off, but I have to find it. But my Larry Elmore story was the year he won the Lifetime Achievement Award. I think that was the last in-person one, right?
Yeah,
It was.
Gen Con.
Yep.
Well, it was the
Gary Con.
Oh, Gary Con.
That last Gary Con in person.
And I went back and I had, when I was like in junior high, like years and years ago, obviously, I think I'm with John in my time frames for starting gaming and stuff. But I had my little circle of friends, because we were the super cool kids in school. We had our own Snarf club, and so I told him
with the ladies.
Yeah, that was some.
Sorry for interrupting.
But he found out about that because I was talking to him about the new book they had come out with, and we must have talked about Snarf for like, I don't know, it was a good hour, and he was signing autographs and ignoring people, just going on. I mean, he's so passionate about that. But
Yeah.
But the thing that really struck me about Larry, and I have it on the YouTube channel, is I took a video of him accepting the award, and I was lucky enough to be standing right next to Margaret Weiss when she was handing it to him, and his little speech, and how he was just so broken up and, you know, on the edge of tears the whole time. And I think that just goes to just how humble and kind of a person he is. You know, he genuinely loves the industry and gamers in general, and, you know, he seems to always want to take time for them. But in terms of like original art, I have come away with, you guys know the Order of the Owl, right? John, you want to tell them while I look for this? You want to tell people what it is?
Mari, you tell him. I'm sorry. 1 second, Mari, you do it, because I've got something. I got to answer a call.
Go for it.
Sorry to do this.
So the Order of the Owl is like a first edition game that they set up shop. I don't know if you remember this, Mari. They set up shop and they were like, come to the table and run order and play the game with us. And I was running games like crazy that year, and I didn't have time to get to the table. But every time I would walk past that little nook to get to my room, because it was just down the hall from my room, they were there. And every time I walked past, it got a little bigger and a little bigger. And it started out with like 4 players, and then there were 6, and then there were 9. And then there was like so many people crammed into that little corner that they could not fit anymore. Well, then on the very last day, I got up and I came down to meet Mari, and there was a few other people there, Matt Barker, who I was going to go see, and the tables were just cleared. Everything was gone except for this. And I'm going to just share my screen real quick. And this is my favorite piece of art from Gary Con. Somebody took little twist ties and made all the adventurers, which I thought was so cool. And I got a picture of it. And someone said you should have taken them. And I'm like, I didn't feel right about it. I half thought about it, but I didn't feel right about it. I thought the picture would be enough. I thought they needed to stay there for as many people to appreciate as possible. But like this archer here is amazing. I mean, all of the little figures have just the right amount, like the curved swords, just the right amount of detail.
Yeah, it's great.
It's just perfect. But so that's kind of one of my favorite, and it's so simple. That's probably why it's kind of one of my favorite pieces of art I've seen at a con. Just the simplicity, and not only that, but the dedication, because those people were at those tables nonstop, night and day, running their little first edition game, and it was so cool. But yeah, it is quite a cool experience. Are you free, John?
I am. I'm sorry. It was actually business related.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have answered it.
Yeah. So tell us about the Order of the Owl.
So here's the problem with Order of the Owl. And I thought you were talking about something completely different. I thought you were talking about the secret society, the Order of the Owls.
Oh.
Which is something totally different. I thought you had some tie-in from that to gaming, and I was like, oh, this will be interesting. So when you started talking about it, I'm like, we're clearly not talking about the same thing.
No.
And now I don't want to sound like a complete nut who knows what the Order of the Owls is.
Oh, well, and I didn't even know what they were. I went in and checked in. I had to get my badge and everything for to be a DM. You know, you go in and you go through and the guy handing out the badges, he's like, oh, you got to come play. You got to come play. And I'm like, all right. And I think he was the DM. I could be wrong, but that was the first I had even heard of it. But I guess they meet there every year, and they may not even sign up for any games, which is cool. You know, that's half of what goes on at GaryCon is, you know, off the charts, as they say, you know, after hours and off the charts. But
at GaryCon, I've never signed up to play in anybody's game, but I've played a bunch of games.
Yes, you always play a ton of games.
Right. My first GaryCon, you know, I was busy at my booth, but I managed to find some time to walk around, and I walk into this kind of it was half vendor hall, half gaming area, and the Kfir booth was there, and they're also playing a game there. You know, there's Dave and Jolly and Steve, and they're like, hey, you want to play? Sit down. They're like, wait, what? Me? And I'm sitting down at a table playing Hackmaster, run by Dave Kfir, with Jolly Blackburn handing me a slice of pizza.
Yeah, GaryCon's incredible though. I mean, there are so many kind people there.
It's the only convention I think I will keep doing just for fun. Even if I'm not doing any more conventions as a vendor, I will keep going to that one just for fun because it's such a blast.
Yeah, my wife and I aren't going to make it this year, but we are right now planning 2023. So
nice.
Definitely going back for 2023. So
you're still sketchy for us. I don't know. I've got my room booked. I'm all ready to go. I'm finishing up the miniature for this year. But I'm like, we might not pull the trigger and actually go. I just have too many people that are at risk around me that I don't want to bring something. I don't want to bring the funk back and kill somebody I actually care about. So,
yeah,
it's kind of a weird thing, you know. I was like a lot of people. I think I was being lulled into a sense of security, and then this all just flares back up again. And you know, I had two guys that are my age. Now, granted, they were both anti-vax guys. Okay. Very clearly, but in the last 3 months, two guys my age have died from COVID-related pneumonia. That's
wow.
I'm vaccinated, so at least, you know, maybe there's something to it, something not to it, you know.
Yeah, but you're right. You don't want to bring it back home.
Well, that's the problem. It's like if I go, I essentially will just hibernate here at the shop for 10 days afterwards and make sure I'm clear.
And even then, you have to think about, let's say you don't give it to anybody else, right? Let's say you do get sick, but you don't give it to anybody else. Can you afford being out of work for a week or two?
Well, so
right, at the best case, right?
I'm under such a huge deadline right now. I'm so far behind on this project, and my business partner, like in the wintertime, because I have a seasonal restaurant, I'm not open in the winter. So it's pretty much full-time miniatures in the winter. My business partner works a 40-hour-a-week job that he drives an hour to and from each day. So he's 10 hours in by the time he gets here in the evening to do a couple of hours of work. So it's a lot of the burden is shouldered on me right now, which is mostly why we're behind. But the story is that he went and got his booster and was sick for 4 or 5 days. And I said, look, man, get a COVID clearance. And, when you feel better, come back. And all I kept thinking was, I can't even go get a booster. If I get a booster and it knocks me down for 3 or 4 days, man, we are just never going to get this done. So I'm waiting until I catch up this next phase, which actually should be by the end of this weekend. And I'll schedule my booster hopefully for next week. But yeah, it's been nuts.
I had my first shot and I was allergic to it.
Oh.
And it was like weeks to get over. Like I had hives, my arm swelled up to twice the size of what it was, and
damn, dude,
it was bad. And they said you can't have another one. So I'm lucky enough that the group that I put together here in Louisiana, there's a doctor, there is a respiratory tech. And they're all like
added your group.
Yeah, they're all like vaccine to the max, and they've all had it too. So they've got antibodies, they've got everything you can imagine, and so we got that going for us. And I think COVID is like a great segue, because just bringing it up, because COVID had a huge impact, I think, on all of you guys. And obviously you're still having an impact based on Johnson. Mari, what did COVID do to you, and what did you change to kind of respond to that?
COVID had an impact in a couple of ways. Like John already mentioned with the supply chains. Well, my business is mostly crafting. I use fabric. What was everyone doing when the pandemic hit? Making masks. Everybody bought fabric. The price of fabric went up. I couldn't find materials. And then now the cost of getting the fabric here from overseas is exorbitant. So it's either you can't find it at all, and what you can find is horribly expensive. And then the conventions, most of my income from my crafting business came through conventions. Yes, I have a website up, but it's mostly so people can see what kind of products I have and things like that. I usually go to conventions and sell there. Well, there obviously weren't any conventions. So I really wasn't doing much. So thank goodness I have a full-time job. I have a great boss. So when I did have a convention I could go to, I could get the time off. She gave me that flexibility. But mostly during the pandemic, I've just been reworking my website, working in my craft room to try to get my product lines and the way I assemble items a little tighter to increase my efficiency, and working on back stock. Currently, my hand is out of commission, so I'm not crafting at the moment very much. But because I have back stock, I have that to fall back on now when the conventions come up. But everything basically came to a stop when the pandemic hit. I had nowhere to go with my products.
How about you guys? I know.
Same.
I know I talked to you guys back when the pandemic started, and I tried to push your products. I tried to help out as much as I could. And I think the links to all 3 of your shops are still on my website as well. Did you guys have any strategies on how to survive?
No, I mean, I was like Mary, it was just 95% of my income came from conventions. Where selling online is very, very tough, right? You gotta know what you're doing. And when you're a 1-person operation, you are design, manufacturing, quality control, packaging, shipping, all of those departments. And on top of that, you got to do social media and marketing. There's just some people have the energy and time for that. I don't. And so, being a successful business online before the pandemic would have been great. It would have certainly helped, but I didn't have that. So I had my Twitch stream, which certainly helped me through the pandemic. I know a lot of artists who didn't even have that. All they were doing is 100% conventions, and even a lot more conventions than I do. I have friends who still do, especially before the pandemic, but still do almost a convention every weekend. of the
Mm.
year. It's insane.
Mm.
And so, but they didn't have any online presence. They didn't stream live. They didn't do anything like that. And they were scrambling really hard. I was lucky to kind of be, you know, I've been streaming on Twitch for at the time, what, 3 years when the pandemic started. So I had my little community that was helping as much as they could, and you know, and all of a sudden I had time to stream every day, right? I wasn't going anywhere, I was staying home, and so I started streaming every day, and I was doing it because I realized we can talk about streaming another time, but I realized that there were people who really needed the place to go, that sort of virtual little space to escape because they were home, stuck at home or whatever. So through 2020, I streamed a total of, I actually didn't stream a total of 14 days throughout the entire year of 2020.
Oh.
And those 14 days were not consecutive days, right? So it was almost every day. And that helped. It was still not enough to make a living. You know, you get a little tip here and there or something like that.
Mhm.
And it does help to advertise your online, you know, website a little bit. But again, it wasn't enough. And without those, it's not just that my business would have been done completely. I would probably be homeless without those, right? That allowed me to pay rent. It allowed me to buy food. You know, I didn't have to you know, crash on somebody's couch for 2 years because of that. So I'm very thankful for those things, for sure. So that was my strategy, is just as far as doing things, just do what I can. I did not want to go get just get a job at with my back issues and all that. I couldn't even get a retail job, but I didn't even want to. It's a pandemic. I don't want to be out there working at a grocery store with a bunch of people, right? The whole
Yeah.
point is to stay home. So I did what I could, right? I did what I had to, but I also just did what I physically could, and I survived, I guess. I mean, it's still going, so I don't know, but
Well, I have another question for you, but I want to give John a chance to talk about what he did during these turbulent couple of years.
Well, you know, fortunately for us, we don't just do our own stuff. So I do casting for other companies, because it's a niche specialized market. We do zinc casting also, so we make other products for people. So it's not all just gaming related stuff. So I kind of had steady money coming in through the whole thing. Nothing to get rich off of, but I was paying bills. One of the things that like I just didn't anticipate. So the 3D printers that we use are not like home 3D printers. With a home 3D printer, you can get water washable, water soluble resins. Not what the ones that we use. It's alcohol only. 90+% IPA alcohol. Okay. I would have never thought I would ever have a problem with that, except every jackhole in the world decided they were going to make homemade hand sanitizer, and they hoarded this stuff up. I couldn't get isopropyl alcohol. I finally found a company that would sell it to me, but I had to buy, was it 8 5-gallon containers, so like 40 gallons of isopropyl alcohol that I'm still using, but I don't need that much. But I also learned I learned really clever ways to filter the alcohol that I had, and kept it sealed up so, you know, it wouldn't evaporate out. It was pretty trying. There were times during that first wave when like the big lockdown happened, like what, March, something like that. During that first wave of that, I remember just being completely depressed. Like, my God, I can't even work. I had a Kickstarter. So luckily we had Kickstarter funds that had come in before that. We ran a Kickstarter before COVID in that fall. I think it did like 31,000. Okay. So I was in the process of trying to fulfill that Kickstarter with no isopropyl alcohol to clean up the prints. Then I had problems with one of my printers. And I just remember there were days going into that spring where I would just come to the shop and I'd be like, I'm just going to watch TV instead. I can't deal with this today. You know, I don't want to make toys today. I think I can just watch TV. So it kind of sucked. Just kept putting me on a further and further back foot until I grabbed myself up by the boots. I got that big supply of alcohol in, and then just said, look, I have to get this done. And we just started cranking things out. Then after that, my rubber supplier, now last summer, he couldn't get the raw materials to make silicon rubber for us.
Oh,
So like I was buying from any company I could get it from, junk rubber that just didn't hold up. I was a lot of supply chain issues, that's for sure. But it's all kind of, at least for my world, it's kind of evening itself back out, other than the cost of metal. That's really the only hindering thing. Like I said, you know, as a business, the survival thing, this has always been a secondary side hustle for me. So like, unlike Kfir, who, hats off to you, brother, I have not ever felt confident enough for this to just be my main gig. Miniatures are there's just so many people in the game, and it expands all the time with everybody who has a Patreon, everybody that's now a miniature maker. Man, it's tough. It's tough to compete with those guys. So, you know,
3D printers, you know, everybody's making their own now.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love that deal, but you know, the average customer doesn't understand the difference between a physical 3D model and what looks great on the screen, or what they can actually paint. So like, some of these Patreons will have, you know, a gajillion people, and they've printed out this amazing looking thing, and the printer can handle the detail. And then you see them paint it, and it looks like they painted it with their thumbs. You know, it's like, so why was all that detail necessary? You're a terrible painter. And there's nothing wrong with being a terrible painter, but those are the same people who are comparing those miniatures to what I produce. What I try to produce is paintable miniatures. I don't, you know, there's professional miniature painters. I don't make miniatures for those people. I make miniature for Matt Rauscher. That's who I make miniatures.
I'm terrible too.
Well, I'm not saying you're a terrible painter. What I'm saying is that you're not a professional painter. You're a dude who could pick up a paintbrush and put some paint on a mini and be very happy with that. And that's what I've tried to produce. Things that aren't ridiculously overcomplicated and in 75 different parts that you have to glue together. The average gamer doesn't want to use glue at all on a miniature. You know, they just, because the standard is set by, you know, Reaper Bones, WizKids, the Nulzers line, all that stuff's pre-assembled, pre-primed by small children in China being paid bowls of rice for their labor. I said it. I said it. You heard it. I'll repeat it. You know, profiting off of Chinese labor. And so that's, unfortunately, that's what I have to compete with. A price point for gamers that is set by non-equivalent wage. You know, I'm not complaining. Reaper's a great company, and so is WizKids, but the market is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were able to exploit it when they did, and bravo to them. You know, well, I'm very happy that Reaper is bringing everything into the United States. That's their goal, I guess, is to push for all U.S. production, which is awesome. You know,
You still make one of my all-time favorite miniatures, the Trampier Stone Giant.
Well, that guy just got a facelift, so we just got through casting 350 more of those.
Ooh.
For our last Kickstarter that we ran, but I bumped its size up to be truly sized like a stone giant.
Like the 5e Stone Giant, or?
Well, no, not like that god-awful thing WizKids put out. No, it's like true 19-foot tall stone giant to 32 millimeter scale. He's about 100 millimeters tall.
He's got to weigh a ton.
It's pretty big, but
I'm gonna have to get one.
Give me your address again at your new place. I'll send you one of the plastic ones down once I start injecting that, because that's the next part of that Kickstarter is I have to remold all of that line in plastic and turn.
I would honestly, I'll order I can order it, and I'll get a metal one.
Just something about a miniature that you could club somebody with, right?
Yes, exactly.
There's a good feeling to that.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
we ran. So that miniature was created for RPG Crate. Chris Hinson, who Chris and I have been decent friends for a few years because of RPG Crate, but we provided miniatures for him for the first 3 years he had a box. And then he's kind of fallen apart on that, and now he does the auction site. But his problem is there was always a budget factor. He could only afford this much for the mini this month. And I'd be like, no, Chris, it'll be much cooler. So there are a bunch of things that I took a bath on where I just said, look, I just want to make it cool. I don't want to have to shrink this thing down any further than what it is. But there were 3 pieces in particular that I had to shrink way down, and I didn't like it. The stone giant, I have an owl bear, and then I have this big obelisk thing. And just because of the weight of the metal on it, I had to make them way smaller and way less impressive. So in this Kickstarter, one of the things that I was shooting for is like, look, we're just going to make these things the proper size. And I went back through the sculpt on that, which, you know, I was happy with the sculpt that I did on that, but I didn't know as much about 3D design for manufacture at that time, because a lot of that I learned on the fly. So there were things in the design of that I corrected when I went back and redid it. So it's actually better in the long run, a better miniature, and isn't destroying the mold.
Well, now I'm excited. I was gonna prime that one. We're having a paint day tomorrow. We have periodic paint days where instead of playing games, we just paint. So that's tomorrow. But and I was gonna primer that one, but maybe I'll wait on that one. I'll try something different. Because I'm anxious now to see this new one. But I want to kind of like shift gears just real quick. John's a restaurateur. But Kfir, you are a fantasy restaurateur.
He is.
Oh. Well, not sure. I guess you could say that.
He's not a halfling. I thought that guy was a halfling.
Yeah, right. He is. I thought you might want to keep flavor text for another episode.
We could. I mean,
I could get you the whole crew to talk about it if you.
That would be great. Yeah, actually, we could. But go ahead and give us the lowdown. I like it.
Well, Flavor Text Adventures. It's sort of my brainchild. I am now the cat herder of Flavor Text Adventures, the director of it. It's a D&D centric monster cookbook or monster cooking blog, in a sense, of the most fabulous halfling chef in the land called Alton Green. And he's basically a bard chef who is not your usual bard in the sense of, singing songs. He's more of a storyteller. Imagine if Guy Fieri and Salt Bae had a baby, and that baby was really short and had pointy ears. So he's an expert at cooking monsters and all kinds of other weird stuff.
Monster recipes.
Right. So we publish on Patreon. You can look for Flavor Text Adventures on Patreon. And we publish every month, basically the monster of the month. So there's a story. We have a writer, actually 2 writers soon, where there's a Alton telling the story of his an encounter he had with this monster, and it's usually a comedy of errors, and it's supposed to be hilarious. Sometimes they're a little more serious and dark, but usually they're funny, and they're short stories. We're not talking anything, it's not Lord of the Rings. And then after that, we have a professionally designed recipe by my co-director Mike, who he's trained as a chef. That's not what he does for a living, but he was trained as a chef. So he designs the recipes and photographs them and all of that. And the recipes are meant to be, sometimes they're really complex. We've had some seriously complex ones that take you like 2 days. I think it was the Chimerical was, which was like burnt tips inside a ham, and then all of it wrapped in bacon, and it was insane. Oh, it was burnt tips inside smoked brisket, I think, inside a smoked ham. It was crazy. But most of the time they're fairly simple, right? They're meant to be things you can cook for your family or your gaming group. So it's basically adventures for your gaming table and the dinner table. And then the third part is, and of course the recipe has a substitute because not everyone can find unicorn meat or cave troll or whatever at the grocery store.
Green
So
slime. Yeah.
right, so we'll tell you, you can go get this or that, and that's kind of a close enough substitute. And then the gaming section, the third part of it is the gaming content, which is D&D 5th edition. When we started, we wanted to make it D&D and Pathfinder, but we found it was just too much work to try and translate everything into two very different systems. So it's D&D 5th edition, and basically in that section we take elements from the story and somewhat the recipe and sort of say, well, what, bring it into the game. So if you encountered this monster and you wanted to eat it, what would happen? Like what kind of a skill check do you have to do in order to cook it properly? A lot of them, there might be bad things that happen if you cook it, if you fail your check, or there might just nothing will happen. Like you can cook it, but you overcooked it, and so now all the good properties are gone. And then what happens when you do eat it? And some of them are more fun than others.
And that's a check the DM should make so that they don't know what's going to happen.
Right. There's what my favorite was when I did the unicorn story. I wrote the story and I did the gaming content for it, and it's that whole thing was kind of a tribute to Gary Gygax. So the story is Alton sending a letter to Lord Gygax, telling him the great news about that he has to share with him, and it's about because the Gygax family had horses, right? And so in this fictional world, and it's not really set in any fictional world, that's the cool thing. It's basically meant to be something that any DM can drop into their campaign anywhere. Everything is very vague. We never mention towns. We never mention specific, let's say Forgotten Realms specific races. It's all kind of vague and generic. So even Alton's Tavern, his famous restaurant, is just called the Big Tavern. That's it, right? So he was writing a letter to Lord Gygax telling him the great news about his prized house mascot, the unicorn Bubbles. And there was this race that Bubbles was supposed to participate in, right? To race in. And so Lord Gygax sent him and his jockey, and Alton convinced that jockey to go pursue his passion for fashion, and took his role as the jockey for the race. And the unicorn ends up getting squashed underneath a giant and turning into burger meat, basically.
Oh.
And so Alton is sharing, the good news, and the good that your prize unicorn is dead. And the good news is not the unicorn is dead, is that the unicorns make great burgers. And the gaming content was this, because unicorns are very magical creatures, had this random table, the percentiles that you had to roll on. And obviously the DM has to roll on it, because one of my favorite things that could happen, you had things like, your hair grows long and rainbow colored, or you get a horn growing out of your forehead. But there was also the possibility that at some point during the next several hours or 24 hours, you might teleport in a random direction, including up.
Oh.
If you rolled 100, you get a wish, right? But you don't know that you got a wish if the DM rolled it. So the first thing out of your mouth that is a wish is going to happen. So that's definitely more fun when the DM rolls it.
I wish I had sausages for fingers.
Right. So there's a lot of fun stuff like that. Sometimes there are creatures that, even for me, to invent something weird that happens if you eat them is too much, like owlbear, for example. Just couldn't think of anything that wouldn't seem like a real stretch. So in that case, we just gave more of, we gave stats for young owlbears and some strategy for how young owlbears hunt and things like that. Sometimes we do NPCs from the story and we'll give them stats. If there's a location, we might do a full map of that location, like a battle map.
Oh, hit me up next time. Like with owlbear, the old school description of owlbear had them as an accident, by mages, and of course you could always have a little of that arcane leftovers in there, and maybe you have a man bear pig or that sort of owl bear pig. Or
there was something kind of similar to that actually in the Goblin chapter, where my friend was like, why don't we do something about the goblin immortality theory, which I'd never heard of. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So apparently it's this theory. I don't know how common this is, but apparently it's this theory that goblins are immortal, but they just never survive long enough to like die, to not die of old age, right? They just get killed by adventurers, by themselves, by all kinds of, you know, things.
Misadventure.
Right. So the whole story was of this necromancer that wanted to become immortal. So he was trying to distill the essence of goblin, and he was making these potions. And there's it's actually probably the darkest, most terrible story we've had. And there's actually a potion of goblin form where that was made from goblins, and you get mutated into all sorts of goblin-like features.
Goblin features.
Yeah, there's a whole battle map of the whole necromancer's lab. That was a great one. I loved it. And goblins taste like bacon.
It tastes like bacon. Huh?
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons why they don't survive long.
I would have thought that was
they're delicious.
While we're on the subject of food, I know of somebody who prepared a ton of food for our gaming groups. And like, oh, it's your birthday. You don't need one cake, you need 3, you know, that sort of thing. And that was Mari. When she would come to our gaming sessions and we would have a food day, which was quite often, it was sometimes you bring over like Cuban desserts and all kinds of things, but the most memorable thing, and I'll let you talk about it, was Halloween.
I'm still remembering how you gagged. I'm sorry. So Halloween is my favorite time of the year, and I tend to go a little overboard with the treats. And I usually do a watermelon brain. I just carve a seedless watermelon to look like a brain, put it in a Ziploc bag, and label it Abby Normal. Deviled eggs with all kinds of coloring. But this one year, I just decided to try a new cake recipe, which you just crumble it up, vanilla and chocolate cake, a little bit of vanilla pudding, vanilla wafers crumbled on top with green food coloring, and then no-bake cookies that you plop on top. And it looks exactly like a pan of kitty litter. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the no-bake cookies, you pipe them out when they're hot and they just plop right into the pan, and then you put a cat litter scooper in there. And I just remember bringing that in. Yeah.
I'm just glad I know that Mari doesn't own any cats, because I wasn't sure if she just kind of grabbed the one that was handy, you know, and
and when you pipe those out when they're fresh off the stove, oh man, they plop just like the real thing. It was awful.
I have pictures of it somewhere.
Yep.
So if I can find the pictures, I'll throw it in an inlay.
I have them. I can send them to you. I also have the prosciutto hand that looks like a severed hand.
Oh yeah, the prosciutto hand. I forgot about that one. There was also the giant spider that was just a giant chocolate cake.
Yep.
And
yep,
she would go all out. Yeah.
Our next recipe for flavor text will be coming out in March. We're taking a break for a couple of months, but our next recipe is basically rust monster poop.
Oh, I thought you were going to say displacer beast litter.
No, it's cookies. They're cookies that are made of rust monster poop. So, and they kind of look like it.
They're high in iron.
Oh,
that's bad. That is bad.
That was pretty bad.
Yeah. So all of you guys have been gaming for a long time, and I know Mari, she mentioned that you know, she came upon it later with me, but she still started in 3rd edition, which by now we're in 5th edition now, and it doesn't seem like that long ago, but you know, it's been a while. It's been a minute, right? So something, and I think all of you guys have played some 5th edition, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Something I like to think about is if there was something from the older editions that you really like, that you would have loved to see, that's no longer in 5th edition, but something that you would have liked to see in the newest edition, what would that be?
Skills. Number one, customizable skills.
Yeah.
When they took that away in 5th edition, it kind of made every single character of that class the same. And when they took away feats, which was a big customizable thing in 3rd edition, and then they took away customizable skills. So there's still a list of skills, but they never change, right? It's just based on your attributes and your ability scores and that's it. And then whatever your proficiency bonus is, which is just static across everyone in your class. So you can't, all fighters of level 4 that have the same strength score have the same, athletics skill. And it's just, I love having my characters feel like they're mine, and I made them unique by given them unique flavor by saying, by adjusting their skills. And when they took that away, I just, it gets to me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mari,
You okay?
got the photos.
sent me the photos of the kitty litter, and I was unsuspecting. I opened up my phone. Oh Lord, I don't know.
It's that bad, huh?
I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
want to see this or not, but
Sure.
well,
John might be able to serve it in his restaurant.
There you go.
Oh,
It was
man.
delicious,
Maybe.
but you got to get past that gag reflex.
That's half everybody's problem with eating, right?
Yeah.
If it looks gross, most people aren't going to ever venture past to find out it's delicious.
Mm-mm.
But you can do a special Halloween opening, right?
Well, I could. The beauty is that I'm closed by Halloween, so I'm open for 4 months out of the year, man. Like 4 months.
The rest of the time you're underwater observatory.
Well, yeah. I mean, although that is knock on wood. Once they got everything operational, they put a whole big huge pump station down by my place, and they're actually raising the break wall right now. So, any luck, I actually just bought the property this year. After leasing it for 17 years, I purchased it this last summer. So
That's a good deal. So D&D though, what would you like to see?
what would I like to see? Well, here's going to be my take on it. All right. I missed the entire 3rd edition. Okay. Prior to that, I was an AD&D. I was actually mostly a Moldvay BX guy with, the original red box before the Elmore covered versions, the ones with Errol Otis artwork on them. I mean, actually, I started playing with Holmes, but the blue Holmes box was the first one that we had, and then moved into the red. I still have copies of it over there, but so this is what I have to say about it, and there is nothing I would like to add to 5th edition. Okay. How I tackled 5th edition was I just looked at it as a separate game that is themed the same way, right? Every game's got its own set of rules. And the thing about it is that if I was like Kfir or Mari, where skills was a thing for me, I'm sure that I would want to see that in 5th edition, but it was never a thing for me, really, because so much was more DM arbitration back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
There's a transition of power I like to see in the video or in the timeline of Dungeons and Dragons. In the earliest days of it, the Dungeon Master very much ruled the roost. It was kind of the unwritten law that if the Dungeon Master said you could do it, you could do it. If you said you couldn't. And there was no rules. There weren't enough rules to back up every single little thing you did. And I believe that the rules, that power exchange happened for a reason. They realized that if you make books that only Dungeon Masters need, then you're only selling to 1/4 or 1/5 or 1/6 of your potential audience. So they had to figure out a way to give more power to a player to sell players' books also. right? You know, back in the day, like we knew one kid that had the Holmes box and he ran the game and we all had a blast with it. And then, you know, at a certain point, when I wanted to run Dungeons and Dragons, which came, it had to be 80, I had been playing for maybe 2-3 years. And I think that red Moldvay box came out at that point. And I remember buying it at a Radio Shack in town. I remember saving $7.50 or whatever the hell it was. And I was so happy to get it with them crappy light blue dice that came in there. And but the point is that for me, the reason why I wouldn't add anything is that I look at 5th edition as its own little beast, right? Are there things that I would play if they were part of it? Sure. Okay. Every time one of the new rule books comes out, you get this flag waving group of people that are like, oh, you made a dungeon for handicapped people. You did meh, meh, meh. Okay, you don't like it, don't use it. Right? So if that's the same attitude, if that's the attitude you're supposed to have about gaming, then the converse is also true. No, you can't just sort of retcon skills into 5th edition. I get that. But if you're playing with a group of people that you like and your DM is amenable to certain ideas, propose it to them. Just say, look, you know, I know this doesn't exist in the game anymore, but I have this thing for my character, and I think that most DMs, if you could accurately explain what you want to do, they're willing to let rules slip for your character to do a thing. Okay. Sure. But I've got a guy. So 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, okay, I had a horrible restaurant season of flooding, as Kfir alluded to. It was terrible. I was flooded out of my 4 months. I was flooded 46 days that I wasn't open. 46 out of 4 months days where I made zero money and had all the expenses and cleaned up floods every day, blah, blah, blah. I was at my wit's end. But my buddies, all of my old school buddies that I'd gamed with as a kid, were all coming to the restaurant basically to cheer me up. They're coming in every weekend and, like, you know, we'd hang out and have some beers. And, you know, it was really refreshing to hang out with them because all their kids are now grown and in college and blah, blah, blah. So moving into the fall, I looked at my one buddy and I said, look, this is it. We're getting together every Tuesday and we're playing Dungeons and Dragons again. And he said, all right, I'm in. I proposed it to the whole group. Everybody was in. I thought, well, great. Let's jump in 5th edition. So all these guys hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons since probably 1988. I can't think of any of them that had. Well, our buddy Don continued. He played all the time. He's played through all the editions, but I was running a 5th edition game, and they were going to play. So, you know, that group, we've been playing now every Tuesday since that, all right? These are old school gamers who they all have the same thing to say about 5th edition. Yeah, maybe there's some things they don't like about it. Maybe it's a little too homogenized, right? But there's enough flexibility. There should be enough flexibility as a group of friends getting together. There should be enough flexibility to adjust things so that all of your players can have and do the things that they want to do. Our buddy Don has a Goliath barbarian, right? And at one point, he's got a girdle of frost giant strength, right? He wants to pick a guy up. He wants to pick this native guy up on this island and that they're being threatened with and hit another guy with it. Essentially, hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker. Okay, right. Sorry about the language, but you know, so I sat and thought, well, okay, well, how do I do that? It's an improvised weapon, but clearly it's not like a club, you know. So the point is the rules don't really have a way to necessarily do that. But if you really sell the story to me, I'm gonna do my best to let it happen if it's cool. If you just say I want to do this thing because it gives me +5 stat to this and blah 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 blah, no, that's not happening, right? Give me some kind of story for it. Give me a reason why we can do this, and let's make it happen and make it enjoyable for everybody at the table, not just so you can quote unquote min max you know, whatever it is you're trying to do. So in closing, what I'd say is there's nothing I would move to 5th edition.
Right on.
Okay.
Right on.
It's
I
its
like
own
the
game.
perspective.
It just is his own game.
We have a lot of house rules. We use a lot of house rules at my table. Some of them are to give that little bit of flexibility, and some of them are to bring in some realism. Mari will tell you we have a disfigurement chart. So if you fail 2 death saves, you have to roll on the chart.
Sure.
And
That's
it
awesome.
could be that you just got a horrific scar, but it could also be that your left arm was hacked off, you know.
Or you got hit in the throat and have to talk like Madeline Kahn for the rest of the game.
Yes. There's all kinds of, and it's all laid out by damage type and whatnot. But in any case, I think every DM has that story. Like nobody, and that may have actually been more true at 1st edition because the rules were so, you know, they're tough in places.
Little there's some spots there.
Yeah.
I remember making charts like that, you know, disfigurement charts when I was in school, you know, just sitting there instead of listening to class, I'm making lists of damage types and writing all the horrible things that could happen to a character.
Mine is actually free on the DM's Guild. You can
nice.
download it. And it's called Bruised and Contused in the Realms. And,
I gotta look that up.
I have to take a look for that.
It's but that's an example. We also have like herbalism is always been a cool skill. It's a proficiency of herbalist kit, but it really has no use. So I created a gigantic herbalism system complete with the herbs and what they do, and some of them have magical properties and so forth. So I think we all adapt in our own way. But before I go off on that tangent, I got a picture to share with you. You might have to hold your breath.
Uh-oh.
I know whenever I look over at it, I have to like hold my breath a little bit. But this is chocolate and vanilla. Mari described it earlier, but this is edible. And that scooper looks clean and new, so I'm a little relieved.
It was only used once.
Oh my God.
Oh God. That
wow.
Is foul looking.
It was, yeah. And then there's the prosciutto hand.
It was filled with different kinds of spreadable cheese.
Wow.
Wow.
And then the brain.
That's cool.
So yeah, that was a good time. That was a good year.
I have a picture I'd like to show. I'm going to try and hunt it up real quick.
Okay.
If we've got time, I'll see if I
Sure.
can find it. It's in my Facebook account that I'm locked out of, though.
Oh.
I can still
Facebook
access
jail?
the pictures. No, not Facebook jail. Weirdly, somebody tried to hack into my account over the summer. And for security reasons, it locked my account up and sent me a password that I thought was some kind of phishing scheme. So I deleted the text message it sent to my phone. And then I got to work and realized it wouldn't let me in. So I have been locked out of this account. Like I said, I can see the pictures, but I've been locked out of the account for months and months, and I created a new one. So I've sent them
Let me see if
photo IDs, all kinds of crazy stuff.
let's see. I think I have to do something so you can share your screen.
Yeah, that might. I'm not sure I can even get to this picture because it's not coming up. But
Let's see.
If he goes to the bottom of his screen, there should be a button at the bottom that says share screen. Yeah.
Well, I'll kind of peruse, but it looks like I'm having no go with it here.
Yeah, well,
These are just horribly out of order.
they could be.
I made a kobold meatloaf. They wanted to
I
eat.
remember that.
Okay, you saw it then. So they wanted to kill a kobold and eat it, and so the next session that happened at the end of a session, and then the next session
That's a flavor text.
baked up. I don't know. I don't.
No, I'm
think-
saying that's a future flavor text.
Oh! I got
All
you.
meatloaf.
Mm.
Yeah. Except this looked like like a goblin anyway. All baked up. I used olives for eyeballs, and it was pretty gnarly. Yeah, I'm not coming up with it. So
Oh well. Well, if you find it, email it to me and I'll throw it up.
I will. All righty.
All right. So, guys, we should probably wrap her up here. Why don't we go ahead and, starting with Mari, go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you and what you're up to these days. I know you need to have wrist surgery, so you're at least you have a backlog of
True.
stock to keep you going. But
Yep, I've got that. But you can find me online at d20stitchery.com, d20stitchery on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I am based out of the Champaign-Urbana area in Illinois. So I hit a lot of these local cons. And you can reach out to me, d20stitchery@gmail.com.
Right on. Kfir, what do you got?
Well, you can find me at cavegeekart.com. Also Cave Geek Art, pretty much anywhere else. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I stream almost daily, nightly, I should say. And then Flavor Text Adventures for the cooking stuff. We might do a different episode on that, but go on Patreon and look for Flavor Text Adventures. We appreciate your support.
I like that idea. I'll write that down. If I can find I got a stack of Dragon magazines here, so it's my notebooks underneath all of that.
Just write it on an old Dragon magazine.
No, sacrilege.
And then have Larry sign it, so it'll be worth it.
Actually, it's the one here. This one is the right before Dragonlance was released. It was the very first. It was issue 83, the very first appearance of the twins before the books were released. So
wow.
Margaret had
that's
published a short story.
Den Bova, that's the chessboard cover, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the dancing hut's in that, right?
Yeah.
Or Baba Yaga's Dancing Hut. I had that exact issue over here. I had it out this week because my Tuesday group is about to encounter Baba Yaga and the Dancing Hut. Oh. So I actually, sitting right here, I printed this off of a PDF that I have of that so I could mark it up and 5th editionize all the levels of the Dancing Hut. Essentially, they're going to get the tank. They have to get the tank out of there to get back to Greyhawk to kill Ayuz.
Right on.
It's a crazy story, but let me tell you about my character.
Oh, okay. Let's hear Let's see here. I my hands are really dry, so I can't turn pages. So the page I want is stuck in the middle. But anyway, John, where can we find you?
You can find me at effingcoolminis.com. You can email me at john@effingcoolminis.com.
That's spelled out E-F-F-I-G.
Yes, E-F-F-I-N-C-O-O-L.
No G.
Or if you go to the Pickled Dragon website, pickleddragon.com, thepickeddragon.com, there's a link to his website there as well.
Yeah, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and that's it. I think, and Facebook, obviously. I think it's all effing cool minis for all of those. But yeah, the effing cool thing, like my summer customers, when I started making miniatures, my summer customers are always like, I see the same people every year, and they're like, well, what'd you do over the winter? Did you go to Florida? No, I started making miniatures. Oh, what do you mean? Well, and I'd show them what I was doing or whatever. And every one of them were like, that is effing cool. Like, but they didn't say effing. And I called my old business partner. I'm like, I got a name for the company, man. And
there you go.
Threw it out there, and he goes, I don't know if it's a good name. I said, okay. Peter Atkinson at GaryCon we were in line together I went to breakfast with Darlene one of the mornings, and Peter was behind me, and he was like excited that he got to meet Darlene, which I thought was funny because she actually didn't know who he was. He's like, can I eat breakfast with you guys? And she asks me if it's okay if he eats breakfast with us. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's me, Darlene, and Peter. I got an effing cool miniature shirt on, and he's just talking to her, and he's like, and like in the middle of stream, he looks up and he goes, effing cool miniatures. That's a great name. And then right back to Darlene. That was all he said to me through the whole breakfast conversation. So I thought if Peter thought it was a great name, it must be a great name.
Did she at the very end of the breakfast say, and who are you again?
no, after he left, she goes, who is he? And I said, well, he's the former owner of Wizards of the Coast. And she goes, oh. She is an absolute gem, by the way. If you have never met her, she's amazing.
Yeah, I met her at Gary Con 2018. And she didn't seem like she was in all that great of a mood. She was sitting in the Artist Enclave, and she was selling prints of the Greyhawk map that she was signing. So I just went up and I bought one, of course, because who doesn't get Darlene's signature on a Greyhawk map? To go back to the Step Brothers reference, but and talked for a few minutes. But boy, she I think that she had a rough go of it that day. But after talking to her for a few minutes, she seemed like she kind of got out of the funk. And I think it was because, like, when I was standing there, I was talking to Matt Barker, I think, and then people were just like going past her, and straight to Larry, who's all the way in the back, and just ghosting her over and over again. And Larry, of course, is there, and he's got his whole entourage around him, and all of his prints and books and everything. So it was, I don't know, I could be absolutely off base, but she was very nice once I started talking to her. So my experience,
I think she's just underappreciated by the modern group of people because she did so few illustrations. She's mostly known for the Greyhawk map, but I'm telling you, the last 3 pages of the Dungeon Master's Guide were my favorite illustration ever. If you guys have the AD&D DM's Guide, the Succubus illustration by Darlene was a favorite of my 14-year-old self.
Yes, and for those of you, and I agree with you, and for those of you who don't know, Darlene, it's just Darlene. So if you want to go find out who Darlene is, that's her name. There's nothing else to look up. Just Darlene. That's how she signed everything with but very, very talented and underappreciated, like John said, underappreciated. So definitely. But with that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Did I get everybody? I think we touched everybody where people could be found. But with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching again. And we'll be back again next week with another show. And I don't know what that is right now, but I'm sure it's around here somewhere. But with that, happy gaming, everybody.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. If you like what we do here on the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell, because it really helps us out.